Welcome back to Dealmakers Conversations, where we sit down with M&A-minded business leaders to talk about how they run their organizations and their thoughts on deal making. In this segment, we sit down with serial entrepreneur Luke Cooper, former owner and CEO of Fixed and CTS, and current CEO of No Mud, No Magic, talk about founding companies, selling companies, raising capital, and the magic of exits. I'm here with Luke Cooper, founder and CEO of No Mud, No Magic. Hey, Luke, thanks for joining us here at the Dealmakers Conference.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be with you today.
So, Luke, let's talk about entrepreneurship. You've been a serial entrepreneur who's founded numerous companies. With each successive one, how did you identify opportunities in the marketplace?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dustin. I think, inspiration's got to come from a couple different places. I think primarily it's got to come from your heart. You've got to believe in the product and the solution that addresses the problem that you're trying to solve, or the problem that you're interested in solving, or the thing that you care about. So I think step one is sort of identifying, an important problem that, will make money, obviously, but also, solve something that you care about. So I think that's the first step. And I think most entrepreneurs, sort of intuitively know that, like they lead with passion in their hearts a lot. And I think, as a result of that, our delusion for capacity can be very high as well. And so the way to sort of benchmark that as a young entrepreneur is to be data driven as well. And, in identifying new opportunities, new business models, new solutions to existing problems or future problems, I think all of that starts with some sort of data set that tells you, that this is a problem worth solving, or that there's enough of a significant, pervasive issue that, you would be, successful in addressing that problem. And for Fixed, this is how it worked out in sort of the last business that I was involved in. So I founded a company called Fixed, and, it was all about, developing ways to support you on your mobile devices. And if you're a big company, mission critical devices meant everything. It's how you, achieve productivity inside of a big company. And so, Apple already existed, and the Genius Bar already existed. Samsung had Samsung Care and all these other products on the market that already existed. But the underlying data set that we were looking at that gave us conviction that this was a significant opportunity that we'd identified in the marketplace was that, the price of cell phones was going up, like contrary to what everyone believed, that they would just continue to decline over time because, cell phones would get smaller. The opposite was happening. So they were going to $1,000 plus. Subsidies as well were going away. So there was a time when you can get a $99 upgrade and get a brand new cell phone. And that was the way that most people sort of upgraded their devices year after year after year. All of that changed in 2014 when the carriers did away with their subsidies. And then, looking at the underlying sort of dynamic of the marketplace itself, you've got, 300 plus, or minus, Apple Genius Bars, and you've got 50,000 daily Genius Bar requests, right? So immediately you have capacity constraint. So, that underlying data set, gave us the conviction that there was a a pretty significant opportunity in the marketplace. That coupled with the fact that it was $18 billion of a total transacted volume in the enterprise space. So I think looking at any problem or any idea from those two perspectives, as an entrepreneur, will always lead you to either validating or invalidating your hunches very quickly.
Luke, did you find that there was a barrier to entry on the second one on Fixed because of those issues?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's a bias especially within the enterprise to use sort of existing infrastructure. And, you got to get past that by demonstrating, something that is, 10x better than the alternative. And that takes a while, right? And so like that we couldn't meet that barrier right out of the gate because our competitors, but one thing that we did observe, Dustin, was that our competitors were overcoming that barrier, but they were not overcoming that barrier in a sustainable, scalable way, right? Their way to overcome the barrier to entry in the market was just throw cash at it, right? And like that works if you're in the valley, right? And you raise, 90 million, right? Or 50 million, as some of our competitors did. The whole group, collectively raised 450 million to my 7.5, right? But I still got to a better outcome, I think, in part because, they tended to sort of see the cash as a resource that would generate new customers and new awareness, et cetera. And for these kinds of businesses, that just doesn't make sense. So, yeah, I think we had some barriers, but we overcame those barriers by just developing tight proximity to our customers, talking to them all the time, developing a complete understanding of all the on ramps that existed within their product suites that could, make it easier for them to consume our product, and that's exactly what we did.
You mentioned that you had raised about $7.5 million. Did you find during that capital raise that there were any lessons that you could impart to young entrepreneurs who are looking to raise in that second Series A, Series B stage?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that a couple things. Like, first and foremost, don't barrage the market. I don't care what stage you're at with a bunch of like emails to random investors. Like, that's never going to get you funding. But maybe you do wind up with funding that way. But what you're really in search of as an entrepreneur is knowledge, is some level of like data that supports your convictions. And so when I went out to investors, I went out to the first 15, and I took the first 5. And I went after the first 5, and I had conversation over 2-3 weeks. And that conversation helped me refine the pitch for the next 5. And that helped me refine the pitch for the next 5. That became 2 or 3 that ultimately made, investments in fixed. And so I think, taking an iterative approach to everything is, entrepreneurs, sometimes we divorce ourselves of like our entrepreneurial ways when it comes to thinking about fundraising or product even, right? Like we start to think very, sort of, pragmatically about those things. And I think you've got to, continue to think about it, from the place of entrepreneurship, even when you get into the later rounds, Series A, B, C, et cetera.
Yeah, when you sold Fixed last year to Assurant, in the midst of a pandemic of all things, how did the deal come about?
Yeah. Yeah, Max, it's funny. I'm actually writing a book about it now, in part about it. But yeah, really exciting, sort of turn of events. We were running out of money. I'll sort of, step past all the details around how we were running out of money, but growing really fast, running out of money, very sort of common startup problems that affect a lot of startups. We couldn't raise money because we were just growing really fast, and like our debt cycles and our AR turns and all that stuff were just so slow. And so we didn't have the features that VCs really loved in the later rounds to raise more institutional money, in a Series B, C, D, or whatever. And so I knew that, and we were just about at profitability. And so I knew that we needed to get to profitability quickly, and then like have a partnership or capital sort of provider in place that would allow us to kind of secure our future. And so what I did was I flew out to Vegas to CES to just see what I can make happen. Right. I knew that Assurant was going to be there. We had a conversation with them in the past. They had made overtures to us in the past. Their biggest competitors were making overtures to us as well. So I was like, okay, if I'm on boots on the ground there, I can just make something happen. I stayed at the one of the cheapest hotels off the strip in Vegas. And I snuck into the VIP reception that Assurant held at the, I think, Caesar Hotel. And I, made a beeline to the CEO, had a lot of conversation with him about, our culture, the enterprise segment that we were growing, over 400% year over year in, AT&T, which was one of our big contacts and big contracts, and how, they cared about AT&T and they didn't have AT&T as a client and all these things, et cetera. And we just had a really great conversation. And within, 60 days of that conversation, we were under LOI. But the best part is, on the way back, a buddy of mine, who was in the similar industry as mine, asked me, hey, you want to ride back to the East Coast? And I had no money, so I said sure. And he flew me back on his private jet. So that's how you go out with style after getting your deal done. Yeah, but that's how it came together. It was just sort of hard work, luck, and just pluckiness. Quite frankly.
Nice. That's a great story. And your previous company was CTS that you had sold a few
Right.
years earlier. But more recently, you founded a new venture, No Mud, No Magic. Can you share some details about that and how you're working with others to kind of understand the serial startup process?
Yeah, absolutely. So after my acquisition, Fixed has done very well. It's producing a lot of revenue for the acquirer, and continuing to succeed in the marketplace. And to me, like, it's not that the company gets acquired for 50 million; it's that it's doing 500 million for the acquirer, right? And so, like, I'm trying to drive those kinds of outcomes for other Black founders, because first and foremost, I mean, we all understand the inequity that exists within venture today. Everyone knows sort of the high level metrics. Less than 1% of VC goes to African American entrepreneurs, et cetera. But there's some other statistics I think people don't tend to sort of think about or care about, other than the fact that like 85% of the money is going to white males. And those metrics that I'm looking at are that when you look at the earlier rounds, African Americans raise roughly half of what majority founders raise in the early rounds, right? So pre-seed rounds, roughly 650,000, and the white majority raises roughly 1.4 million, right? But what you don't see is that when you get into Series A, B, C, D, later rounds, they catch up. And so those Black founders, not only do they catch up, they have bigger outcomes. So what that tells me is, while everyone's sort of focused around like raising more funds, $100 million fund, Harlem Capital, which were investors in Fixed, Precursor Ventures, raised their last round, hundreds of millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars, also investors in Fixed. I think those are good positions in the market to have. However, where the exhaust needs to happen is creating outcomes. And No Mud, No Magic is all about that, right? Through advisory, through supportive investment that is meant to sort of help carry you to some sort of outcome, and through outreach and partnership with the Fortune 500. So we've got incredible relationships with, significant portions of the Fortune 500s to bring awareness of all these great startups that can produce the same kind of outcome that Assurant produced by acquiring Fixed. So that's what No Mud, No Magic is. And, it really tells the story of me, my story of coming out of the mud and into the magic of, acquisitions and growth and, all the other benefits that come with that. So yeah, I'm using that today as a platform to sort of support more African-American underrepresented entrepreneurs.
No, it's great. And really, Luke, really appreciate you sitting down with us here at the Dealmakers Conference, sharing your story, and best of luck with this venture, and congratulations on your other ventures.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Luke. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed this segment of Dealmakers Conversations. If you don't know where you're headed next, please visit the Agenda tab, find your interests. We'll see you back here for the next Dealmakers Conversation segment in about an hour.